Tommy, come on, take another bow. I'm Dreesen, ladies and gentlemen. There he is. That's my man. My number one man. Tommy's funny, isn't he? He's a marvelous guy, Tommy is. Where is he? Take a bow, pal. There, this is a funny man. And a nice man.
All right. What a great way to be introduced. Now, my guest today is a legend. He's a legend to comedians everywhere in the world. Everyone knows him and admires him. And Tom Dreesen, one of the best in the business, and I am honored to be speaking with you today in this world of comedy. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you, Bruce. Whenever somebody introduces me as a legend, I always remind them that you're a legend because all your critics are dead. You outlived all your critics.
Well, you know what, Tom? I mean, I know you from 40 years ago, 82, and it's almost 122 here. So you sound great. You look great. I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, you got to share it because you look great, sound great. It looks like you haven't skipped a beat. I'm very happy for you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Bruce. And it's good to see you again. It's been a long time. But as far as looking, my hair is a lot grayer, of course. And but although I dyed this, I wanted to, I didn't dye. I used to dye my hair for certain roles in the movies. Then I quit doing it. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I quit dyeing my hair, but I had to play a part of a priest and then 2 weeks later play a part of a Baptist minister. And I thought I'd grow a beard and I'd have the beard gray because my hair is gray. But the beard grew in dark. I swear to God, I'm not doing anything at all with it.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not, and I don't know why, but my this came in dark. And now my buddies at the golf course are saying, you're dyeing your face. I said, no, I swear to God, I'm not. I swear, on my children, I'm not. I don't know why it turned out that way, but since I did the 2 films and I got to do one more take in one of the films, I'm keeping it, for a little while.
So what film are you working on now?
There's 2. One is with Paul Rodriguez, where he plays a homeless guy, and I'm like a parish priest. And the other is Maximini, who a good friend of mine, another comedian. He's doing a film, and where I played a fire and brimstone Baptist minister. I mean, really fired up. That was fun to do. The irony is, for years I've been telling comedians that are new, do you want to be a stand-up comedian? I say, watch those evangelists. Watch the way they work a crowd, not for their content. Why they don't talk in monotone. No. They take you up hills and down into valleys and back up to the hill again. And that's what the stand-up comedian does. You can't do an hour or an hour and a half depending if you're headlining and have one tone. You got to have different colors in this rainbow that you're talking to the audience about. So to me, it was fun playing a Baptist minister.
Hey, it's exactly what I want to hear, Tom, because I know that even though the comedians are listening to this and watching it, they're all watching it. I know that as the weeks and months and maybe even years go on, and young people are going to start learning about this show, and they're going to get invaluable information like that from people like you that's going to help them who want to be on stage.
Well, that's good. Bruce, I'm a stand-up comedian first, last, and always. That's who I am. That's who I really believe I was put on this planet to be. And I didn't know that till I found it. When I found it, it was like an epiphany. That the first laugh I ever got on stage, I knew, oh my God, this is what I've been searching for. So I've been doing this. This is my 51st year.
Oh my gosh.
Aside from being a stand-up comedian, I'm a motivation speaker, and I talk at corporations, at universities, but I have a specific class that I teach comedians. It's called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There.
Wow.
And I talk on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And I've been doing this since the late 70s into all through the 80s. I gave it to comedians, and even to this day, I stop every now and then and go to a comedy club, and they'll get 200-300 people in there. In Chicago, we had about 320 people in there to comedians from all around the Midwest. And I talked to them about this journey we're on as stand-up comedians and how to enjoy this journey as opposed to, grinding and not enjoying the trip we're on,
So, speaking of the journey, what I love so much about this show is that it gives me an opportunity to learn about your story from the earliest days and from when something clicked into your head that you wanted to be on that stage. You saw something on TV, you walked into a bar or a club. What was it like for you?
For me, I never ever thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be a stand-up comedian. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I had 8 brothers and sisters in a suburb called Harvey, Illinois. We lived in a shack, no bathtub, no shower, no hot water. It was a rat-infested, roach-infested shack. I mean, if you had holes in your shoes, you put a cardboard in it. If you had a window broke, you stuck a rag in it. We were poor. Now, I would take my shoe shine box. In my childhood, I had to help feed my brothers and sisters. I was the third of 8. So I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers on the corner, and all to help feed my brothers and sisters. None of this do I regret, by the way. And that's what I tell my motivation class when I say what I just said. I say, and that is the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because that's the way I perceive it. And all of life is about perception, how you perceive it. So in those bars that I was at where I was shining shoes and all that, one of the last bars I went to was where my mother was a bartender and my uncle owned a tavern, Frank Polizzi. He owned a tavern and he told jokes behind the bar. And it just fascinated me as a little boy that this guy, with his inflection, with his vernacular, could cause this sound to come out of people's bodies that filled the room like electricity and united everybody. They were all together then. I was fascinated by that. And I used to tell some of his jokes, many that should not be told on a Catholic school playground, telling barroom jokes. But I like to tell funny stories and I like to make people laugh. It always pleased me to make people laugh. So now through my teen years and then going through a lot of struggles, dropped out of high school, ended up at age 17 going in the Navy and spent 4 years in the Navy and 9 months in a Marine Corps unit called NEGDF. I would hear a good joke and I'd tell somebody a good joke. Or when I came out of the service, I was tending bar in the same bar where my mother used to be a bartender. And I could write funny jokes about people in the neighborhood, just make up stuff. If they all knew Bruce Starr, I would say, how Bruce is. And then I would tell a funny story, not to demean Bruce, but just to exaggerate on his characteristics. And I'd get bigger tips, and that kind of stuff. So I enjoy telling a funny story, but never thought I'd ever be a comedian. I'm in a civic group called the JCs, Junior Chamber of Commerce, when I came out of service. And they did civic projects, helping the community get over the whatever problems the community had. The JCs attacked that problem. And by doing so, they taught you leadership training program, how to speak in front of an audience, how to conduct a meeting, Robert's Rules of Order, how to serve on committees, subcommittees. And I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor, a concept I had of getting the kids laughing, playing some music, and then planting the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. In those days, they weren't teaching drug education at a college or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. And as it is, and this is the truth, at that time I was praying, saying, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? I was going from job to job to job, never satisfied with anything I was doing, feeling very unfulfilled. I'd be in a bar with my buddies at 2:00 in the morning. I had a wife and 3 kids at home, but I'd be in a bar with my buddies and I'd be looking around and say, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belong. Now, one day I'm proposing this drug education program to the JCs that they would sanction it. It was at a general meeting. And that night, a new member showed up and he said, I walked up to me afterward, a black guy. He said, I like that project. I'm a new member. It's my first meeting. I would like to help you with that. And I said, gee, I already got a guy. I had a white friend named John DeBoer, And I said, thank you, but I already got a guy. Next day, as fate would have it, my prayer being answered, John DeBoer calls me and said, I got a new job. I can't help you. I said, gee, what was that black guy's name? Oh yeah, Tim Reed. I called Tim. We worked on the project together, went into the school system. The program became very successful. JCs use it as a model program in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries. Wow. As how to teach drug education at an elementary school level. And one day, leaving the classroom, A little 8th grade girl stopped and said to Tim and I, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team." And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us because no one had ever done that before. Now, this is 1969. There were no comedy clubs in America. We had to work all black clubs in the North and the South, what they affectionately call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. We worked all white nightclubs too. We ended up working the Playboy Circuit. We stayed together for 6 years. The team split up. Tim wanted to be more of an actor. I ended up on the West Coast, but and struggling, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to say that first time I went on stage with Tim Reed, something I had written got a laugh. And when it did, it was like one of those B movies where the dark clouds opens up and the sun bursts through, and my whole being went, "Oh yeah, this is what I want to do."
Electricity goes through you.
Yeah, I knew that moment. This is what I want to do. I want to, and I'll close with this. It was a Friday night. I had never been on stage before. I couldn't sleep that whole night. I'm tossing and turning. I had a wife and 3 kids. I get up in the morning. I went down to the church where I was an altar boy when I was a kid, and where I sang in the choir, and where my mom sang in the choir when she was a little girl. Now, there was no service at all. It was an empty church. I got down and I prayed. I said, "God, now I know. I want to be a stand-up comedian. I now know what it is I want." The thought that you could make a living making people laugh overwhelmed me. I said, "God, if you could just let me make my living making people laugh, I'll do charities." I made all these promises, and all my prayers were answered. To close with story, that was September 1969. In September 2019, 50 years later, I went back to that church and I gave a sermon in that church called The Power of Prayer. And I told that congregation, I knelt right over there, and what I asked for came. So anyhow, that's a long story to a very short question.
No, I want those stories every time. I'm not here to hear me talk. That's exactly what I would love for the show, is what you're doing. This is just fantastic. So then you and Tim went for 6 years. Tell me a little bit about that, and how did that go?
Well, there were no comedy clubs in those days. So like I say, we worked all black clubs, what they call the Chitlin Circuit, the 20 Grand in Detroit. Motown at that time was in Detroit. So, their offices were in Detroit. So there was a club called the 20 Grand where all the Motown acts broke their act in there in Detroit before they went on to Las Vegas. So, and it was great. You'd be there. There was Dinah Ross and Smokey Robinson, the Miracles, the Temptations, the OJs, etc. But so we'd work that club, the 20 Grand. We worked in Chicago. The High Chaparral, the Burning Spear, and all that club. We worked in Sugar Shack in Boston, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City before they had gambling. And the fascinating thing about the Club Harlem was, in those days when you worked nightclubs, you would open on a Monday and close Saturday night, okay, or maybe a Sunday night. At the Club Harlem, you opened on Saturday night and you closed the following Friday. But the Saturday night first show was 10 o'clock at night. Second show was 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Third show was 6 o'clock Sunday morning, called The Breakfast Show. And all
God.
the waiters and the waitresses and the night people would come there, 1,300 people, but also all the pimps and the hoes from Newark, from Philadelphia, from Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. They all came down that Sunday morning. When they did a good job, the reward was to go to the Club Harlem, and they'd pull up with their Rolls Royces and their Cadillacs and their cars, and I'd be the only white guy. It was just an experience like it's hard to believe. It's all in a book that I wrote. But anyhow, nonetheless, it was an experience in those days because it wasn't comedy clubs, and two comics never followed one another. Years later, when the comedy clubs came in and came in strong, if you would have told comedians in my day, "You're going on stage tonight and there's 5 comedians in front of you," they'd have said, whoa. I'm not going to do that. That's hard to do, but then that became the way to do it, and today, of course, I've done it like everybody else and like you've done it, and we've all done it.
Well, I was a personal appearance agent. I got, jobs for everybody, and we'll eventually get to the comedy clubs just exploding before our eyes in the 80s. So take me from Tim Reed, who's a very successful actor now, and then all of a sudden you were on your own. Take me from that point on through into the comedy system for you.
that broke my heart. When the comedy team split up, it was Tim's idea, not mine. I dreamt that Tim Reed and Tom Dreesen would be, not only were we America's first black and white comedy team, but history shows we were the last, but no one has done it since. But I thought we might become the greatest comedy team on the planet, or at least that was my goal, because I'm always been a motivation kind of guy. I've read literally hundreds of books on the powers of the mind. And I just really wanted us to become this great success. Tim, a woman kind of broke up the act, and that again, that's in the book as well. But when that happened, it crushed me because, now I had never been on stage alone, and I was actually sitting in a bar with my buddies when the team split up, and it's like almost closing time, getting there 2:00 in the morning, and they closed the bar then. And I had a couple beers in front of me, people are buying a beer here and there and the other thing. And I was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? I don't want to leave show business, but I've never been on stage alone. So I was always real good at alternatives. And I sat at the bar and I'm thinking, okay, I can get another black guy and do the same act. Or I can, get a job in the factory that my wife wanted me to do. She hated show business and wanted me out of it. When she married me, I wasn't in show business. When she married me, I was bringing a check home, every Friday, like her dad did for 40 something years. She wanted that kind of life. So now she wanted me out of show business. So I said I could get a job in the factory and give up this dream of mine, or I could go it alone. And at the bar that night, I said, I'm going to try to go it alone. And I started thinking about what am I going to do? I said, in those days, in 1975, wherever you went in America, wherever you went, people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah? You ever been on Johnny Carson? And if you had been on the Johnny Carson show, on the Tonight Show, in the eyes of America, you just weren't a comedian. You might want to be one. You might going to be one, but you weren't one now. So everybody was moving out to the West Coast, all across the land, because Johnny Carson had moved his show from New York out to the West Coast. And one appearance on the Tonight Show, your life changed. Freddie Prinze did one appearance, got a sitcom the next day. And that was all over the industry, right? So now I'm sitting at the bar. I said, okay, I'm going to go it alone and I'm going to try to get to the Johnny Carson show. That's my goal. And then I remembered a book I read by Clement Stone called PMA, Positive Mental Attitude. He said, if you know what you want in life, and if it's a noble endeavor, search your life and see if there's anything in your life that can deter you from that noble achievement, and then get it out of your life. And I thought, when I was sitting there, what could stop me if I wanted to make it as a stand-up comedian? And I thought, alcohol. I love drinking beer. I was a beer drinker with all my buddies, like my dad was with it, his family, my mom drank. I mean, I love drinking beer with the boys and hanging out, but I know you can't have a sharp mind on stage if you're waking up with hangovers every morning and all that kind of stuff. And I knew also to succeed as a stand-up comedian, and I believe it to this day, you cannot succeed unless you're also a good writer. Unless you're very wealthy and you can buy jokes. And there's not very many people out there that can write good for stand-ups. So if you couldn't write material, then chances are you wouldn't last very long. So I knew if I had hangovers all the time and I wasn't going to be in the mood for writing material, I'd be spending my nights in the bars when I should be spending my nights writing. All of that came to me. And I said, alcohol, that might stop me. I pushed these 2 beers across the bar and my buddy was come up to me who was behind the bar, Italian buddy of mine named Jimmy Lepore. He said, true for tonight, Tommy? I said, I quit. He said, true for tonight, huh? I said, I quit. He said, for tonight? I said, I quit drinking. He went, yeah, right. I'll see you here tomorrow. But I never touched another drop. So long after I was doing Tonight shows and succeeding and all that stuff. And then I had a couple of beers one night. I said, it just isn't the same anymore. So I still don't drink,
Yeah, that's a great story. So take me to where you decided that you were going to do it yourself. You were going to stand up and you were going to find places to do your work. What was that like, being alone and facing whatever, the competition that was out there or the comedy clubs that were just coming together?
Well, I get to the West Coast and I told my wife, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And I felt in a couple of weeks I'd get discovered out there, and then call her and say, guess what? I got this show or that show. Well, I get out there and I'm hitchhiking to the Comedy Store every night. I end up sleeping. First, I was house sitting for a friend of mine and then I couldn't do it anymore. I ended up sleeping in an old Nash Rambler that was in behind this girl's house up on blocks, and it wasn't my car. It was an old Nash Rambler, and the front seat came down. I ended up sleeping in that car and hitchhiking to the Comedy Store every night, begging to work for free. I couldn't get on at the Comedy Store at all. It took me like 30 days just to get that one audition in front of Mitzi Shore, the owner. And you would get a chance to do 5 minutes in front of her, and the pressure in those days was enormous, Bruce, because if you didn't score with her, it might as well be back to Chicago, back to Toledo, back to wherever you're from, And I finally got a chance to audition for her, and I got, she said, okay, you got some stage presence, you look like you've done it before, I'll put you on the regular schedule. And
so let me just ask, I'm sure you borrowed material from with you and Tim, and you managed some of it that you were able to do on your own, because you do need a good solid 5 minutes to show your stuff.
None of it from the Tim and Tom act could I do.
Wow.
None. I wrote all that material, and it happened when I was with the comedy team. We were on a TV show in Chicago one time with Jack Benny, a comedian that I loved. And he gave me some advice. He said, if you're going to go out and do the Tonight Show, and at that time was the furthest thing from my mind, he said, you're going to appear in front of 25 to 30 million people. Don't go out there and tell them about the government or the airlines. They don't know who you are yet. Write 5 to 6 minutes of material about you, your brothers and sisters, where you came from, your hometown, the school you went to, all those things, the Catholic school you went to or whatever it was. So I wrote routines about that, about my 8 brothers and sisters, going to Catholic school, playing basketball on an all-black basketball team, playing football on an all-black football team. I wrote those routines. And and so my first 10 minutes was about my life, so that when you walk off stage, Jack Benny said, they'll say, oh, wasn't he funny? And do you know he's from the south side of Chicago? He had 8 brothers and sisters. He went to Catholic school. He played basketball on an all-black basketball team. You left part of you out there, So that's what I did. I wrote that material and tested it out in different places anywhere I could. But when you got out to the West Coast in 1975, there were no other comedy clubs, just the Comedy Store. And it was the hottest place in the world to be for a comedian. I'm on stage every night with all these new kids. No one ever heard of them. Jay Leno, David Letterman, Robin Williams, Gallagher, Michael Keaton. The girl waiting tables was Deborah Winger. So the excitement, because every night someone was getting discovered. Every night somebody would come up and say, I just got the Merv Griffin show. I just got the Mike Douglas show. I just got the Dinah Shore show. The people from Canada were sending the talent coordinators down because there were shows up in Canada that they would fly comedians up. It was the energy and the excitement was hard to describe, and it was just on the move. And there were no comedy clubs. Now, Mitzi Shore was a comedy club that didn't pay. Later the improvisation came out from New York after Mitzi had gotten established on Sunset Boulevard, but they didn't pay. There were no comedy clubs across the land yet where they paid comedians, So they just started happening. And then, Bruce, overnight, there were over 550 comedy clubs in America. There were 3 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. All of a sudden, comedy became rock and roll of the 80s, as you know.
And that's where it left a little room for me, because my roommate, Barry Martyr,
sure,
Barry,
sure,
we became roommates, and he said, listen, these guys, ICM and William Morris, don't want to call comedy clubs in Pittsburgh for them for a $2,000 or $3,000 gig, and they don't want to do it. But you know them, you're friends. I know them. We're friends. I write for them. They'll let you call for them. I said, well, I'm not really crazy about being an agent, because I heard everybody hates their agent, right? So I didn't want to do something that everybody hated. But after a while, he kept saying, you really should do it. And, I had about 35 comedians after a while, all the people that were performing at the Evening at the Improv. And so the Evening at the Improv around 81 really started taking things to another level nationally and on TV.
Yeah, well, again, our goal in those days was there was no cable in those days. So even the improv came when there was cable. In the 70s, there was no cable. There was ABC, NBC, CBS. And again, there was the Tonight Show. And again, one appearance could change your life. So that's what we tried to get to. Now, as businessmen, now we're in show business, that's two words, show and business. Okay, how do you get on the Tonight Show? If you knew that's what your goal was, well, you'd watch the Tonight Show and see what the comedians that were on there, what they were doing. And it became very obvious. You had the right material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. You know, you couldn't say go to hell. You couldn't swear. You know, cable came along, and you know, there's comedians that went on cable that made Red Fox blush. You know, but in our day you couldn't do that. So we focused on how to do that. Once I got into the Comedy Store, and when I thought I had enough material, I began to pester the Tonight Show, a coordinator named Craig Tennis from the Tonight Show to come and see me. I did all sorts of funny machinations to get him to come there. I did funny things. You know, I played softball against him, and I ended up making him laugh. And anyhow, long story short, I did finally get him to come and look at me one night at the Comedy Store. And he was looking at 3 acts that night. Bruce Baum, he was with a comedy team called Baum and Esten at the time. And he later became Bruce Baby Baum, as you know. But Bruce Baum and Esten later wrote for Cheers. But they were looking at Baum and Esten, they were looking at me and a new kid named Billy Crystal. You know, I don't know whatever happened to Billy Crystal, but I'm on the Bruce Starr podcast right now. Eat your heart out, Billy. Anyhow, Billy and I got the show that night. And he came, the coordinator said, afterward, he said, I liked your set. I want you to come to my office tomorrow. I went to NBC the next day, and he said, and I thought he was going to say, in 6 months or a year, we'll put you on. We're going to nurture you. You know, he said to me, I saw you do 20 minutes. Show me if I put you on the Tonight Show, what 5 you would select of that 20. So I did a routine in front of him at his desk, and he said, okay, take this one out and put that one in. And pretty soon he said, you're all set. You're on next week, Tuesday. Wow. Now, I told everybody back in Chicago, I told the world, I'm going on the Tonight Show. I get there, I'm in makeup, you know, you don't eat for like a week, you know, you work on this set every night. They put you in makeup, they take you up to your dressing room, you wait a few minutes up there, they bring you down to the green room just before you go on, and then you go on, right? Well, I go down to the green room, I'm getting ready to go on. They came in, they said, we ran out of time. We're gonna have to bump you, come back next week. I came back the next week, makeup up to my dressing room, down to the green room, getting ready to go on. They said, we ran out of time again. They did that 3 times in a row, 3 weeks in a row. And finally, the 4th time, I'm in makeup. And Fred DeCordova, the producer, came in. He said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. Now you're rubbing your throat the size of a grapefruit. You know, I said, oh, this is it. This is it. This is D-Day now. Now, I'm in the green room, and they go, Bert Convy is going to sing a song, and he does, and they bring me back behind it. When he's finished with the song, they're going to go to commercial break. Carol Burnett was on the show that night, I remember. So when they go to commercial break, they bring you around this long walk from the green room all the way around to the back of the curtain, and you stand in the dark there. And now when you became a veteran, when I became a veteran of the Tonight Show, all the stagehands would see me. Hey, Dreesen, how's your Cubs? Hey, how's it going, Tommy? You know, you'd wave at everybody. Your first time when you're making that long walk, they all turn their back on you and they whisper, it's his first time. It's his first time. Because they know this is a pressure moment. You get that curtain, Doc Severinsen is playing because they're in commercial break. And the music is playing. The coordinator said to me, Tom, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. He said, okay. He walks away. Now you're all alone. And there's one guy back there. He's going to open the curtain for you when you go out there. And now you're pacing a little bit and you're thinking, what was my first joke? Oh, geez, what was I going to, oh, yeah. Now you're talking to God one-on-one. God, don't leave me now. You know, I need you now, you know. And then the music stops and your heart stops.
Oh my God.
The light comes up on the curtain there and you realize they're out of commercial break. There's 26 million people watching this show. Not only that, all the coordinators are watching the show. Casting people are watching the show. People who book Las Vegas, Tahoe, Reno, they're watching the show. Not only that, my mother had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois watching the show. So if I bomb, I can't even go back home, you know. So now, but you hear Johnny Carson say, we're back now. And I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on The Tonight Show. Will you welcome, please, Tom Dreesen? Now, that one line, I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight. He set them up. This is his first time. Now, when they open that curtain, you walk out, bright lights hit you. You can't see the audience. They're in dark shadows. There's a spot on the floor taped that you were told ahead of time you're supposed to stop there. You hit that spot, they're applauding, and you get that first joke out, and it got a laugh. And I got that second joke out, and it got a laugh. And then the third joke, and pretty soon I'm on a roll. I got applause. On the fourth joke, Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon are laughing behind me.
Wow.
I'm on a roll now. I got 8 applause. I finally finished. I said, I did my last joke. I said, you've been a wonderful audience. Show business is a tough life. So if you like me, just if you like me, and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me. I walked through the curtain, and Johnny Carson calls me back for another bow. The coordinator comes back. Go back. I want you back. I said, go sit by Johnny. He said, don't go sit by Johnny. Dude, no, just go back. Now you go back through the curtain, and they're still applauding, and Johnny does that little circle that he used to do, like that. And you knew that you had arrived. I went back through the curtain, and Bruce, I did 61 appearances on The Tonight Show from that night, but I never stopped working from that first night. That's how powerful it was. The next day, these were the shows that wanted you, that you performed on: Johnny Carson, Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin, Dinah Shore, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand, Hollywood Squares, $20,000 Pyramid. All those shows were calling me. I'm the only white comedian ever to do Soul Train,
Wow.
But that's how hot that show was. And then I was getting guest acting roles on different shows, Facts of Life, and, all those kind of shows, Murder, She Wrote, and Columbo. And, it was just hard to describe,
Tom, I've been asking people about that moment that you just described. No one has been able to describe it like you just did. I am not a performer. I could never do that. I could never put myself out in front. I'm a professional speaker like you. I can do that. I've been doing radio and television, but to get out on stage by myself, everyone looking at me, So you described that beautifully, and I thank you so much, because it was perfect.
Well, thank you. But you know what? Ask athletes or anybody that there comes a time in your career, you've worked hard, and this is called seize the moment. Seize the moment. This is the moment. There's a song called that One Moment in Time, and a girl named Dana Winter does it real good. I mean, you can download her. I mean, of course, Whitney Houston did it too, but there's lyric in there that this is that one moment in time where I can be all that I prepared to be, that this is that moment, that if I seize this moment, that I will be happy for eternity, and that was that moment behind that curtain of The Tonight Show. If you seize that moment, this is going to change your life. In baseball, I've heard guys say there's a guy who was hitting 142. They were going to send him down to the minors. It was over. His career was over. He knew it. There was an injury and another injury, and all of a sudden he's placed up at bat with the bases loaded in a World Series or in a playoff, and this is that moment. If he gets that hit now, he turns all that around, everything that he worked for all of his life. And that's what all of us at some point, that one moment in time where I can be all that I came to be,
And when you're ready for it, and it's meant for you, and you've prepared for it, it's not such a huge leap. It's a huge leap, but it's not impossible. And you showed beautifully that when you do the right thing and you prepare, you can do it.
You said the magic words, prepared. I always tell everybody, what good is a break if you're not ready when the break comes? What good is a break if you're not ready when a break comes? I tell young actors, I studied acting in Chicago and of course in LA, and I tell young actors all the time, you haven't had a role in 6 months, 8 months, and your agent calls you and tells you, get over there right now and read for a part, and you haven't done that in 6 months, You need to be going to acting classes. I don't care how much experience you've had in the past, just to stay oiled, doing scenes with another actor. You can't just, I haven't acted in 6 months and think you're going to be sharp. Stay oiled. What good is a break if you're not ready when the break comes? I come off the road to this day, and the first thing I do is call the Laugh Factory or go by the Comedy Store and get up and do a set. I've been doing this 51 years, but that doesn't mean I can't, still work on new material and stay oiled. That's what it's all about.
And Tom, no one was more respected than you. You were a few years older than some of the comedians, the Seinfelds and the Risers and all those guys. You're very respected. Everybody looked up to you. Did you have more intimate relationships with any of the comedians, any of the people at the clubs, other than in passing?
Oh yeah, Dave Letterman and I, from the day one, from the first day he came out to the West Coast, we've been friends. He calls me. Yes, we talk to each other all the time. David Letterman, Jay Leno, I stay in touch with Jay. And then David and I are a lot closer because we played a lot of sports together. We played basketball together and played racquetball together. And we've stayed with each other through the years. I did 50 appearances on David's show. He even let me host the show when he had the shingles, But I stayed friends with almost all the ones that I started out with. But I'm also, Bruce, still friends with people I grew up with, those that are still alive. I stay real close to the old neighborhood and all that kind of stuff. I have to say that I'll tell you a funny story about Letterman. He calls me about 2 months ago. He said, every time I do an interview, he said, or you do an interview, and people say, how did we meet? We always tell the same story, that you came off stage at the Comedy Store. It was my first day in town. Wow. I saw your set. He said, I saw your set and I complimented you. And we started a conversation and we've been friends since. I said, yeah. He said, well, it's a boring story. I said, well, it's the truth. He said, I don't care if it's boring. From now on, tell people that you came off stage. I was in the parking lot. I stole some material from you and you beat the hell out of me in the parking lot. Now, why would I tell a story like that? He said, because it's a better story. Anyhow, now, 2 weeks go by. He calls me. This is all true that I'm telling you, Bruce. He calls me. He said, do you know the governor of Illinois? And I said, I met him, but I don't know him. He said, well, he had a serious problem. His wife has a friend whose adult son was autistic. And the autistic men and women, adults in Chicago, had a piece of land. There was a piece of land near the hospital where they planted corn, beans, and tomatoes. And then when it came into fruition, they fed the homeless with that. Well, the state was going to take that property away. And David wanted to know, could he intervene and talk to the governor? I said, I don't know him, but I know the Senate president. The president of the Senate, his name is John Cullerton, and he's a pretty powerful guy in the Illinois General Assembly. Let me call him. And I called him and he said, oh, Tom, tell Dave not to worry, that there was a law here and a statute there, and we're going to do this and we're going to make it work. So we won't take that land. I said, could I have Dave call you and you explain it to him? Because I was real busy and it was a little more complicated. And you could assure him better. He said, absolutely. And I said, oh, by the way, John, when you tell Dave you helped him, tell him the only reason you helped him is because Dreesen beat the hell out of him in the parking lot at the Comedy Store. He said, okay. He didn't know what I was talking about. He said, okay. 10 minutes go by, my phone rings. I go, hello, and it's Letterman. Didn't I tell you it's a better story? I tell you it's a better story,
That's fantastic. So this is the book that you've written. It looks great. Still standing. My journey from the streets and saloons to the stage and Sinatra, Tom Dreesen, forwarded by David Letterman. Like I said, I'll be showing this from time to time during the show. So what I'd like to know is, how did that first time go? How did you meet either Frank Sinatra or his peeps and put you in a position to work with them?
Well, once I did my first appearance on The Tonight Show, as I said earlier, a whole new world opened up to me. Wow. Not only was I doing all those TV shows, but singers in those days, if you went to Las Vegas, every single hotel on both sides of the strip had a singer, comic, singer, comic, singer, comic. It might be the comedian headlining and the singer opening, or the comedian opening and the singer headlining, but all up and down the strip, that's what it was. I was getting calls in those days from all these acts hired me. to work with them. Gladys Knight and the Pips, Tony Orlando and Don, Mac Davis, Frankie Avalon, James Darren. I'm going to leave people out. And of course Sammy Davis Jr. and Smokey Robinson. Because they all had family type audiences, and they couldn't use a comedian that swore, that used blue language. Well, as you know, we use the term blue. He works blue. For those who listen to the show don't know, that means that you can swear and curse or talk about sexual acts or whatever. They didn't hire comedians. These singers didn't at that time, and there were no comedy clubs again at that time. So now I'm going out on the road. I'm going to Vegas, Tahoe, Reno, Atlantic City with all these people. Sammy Davis Jr. took me first. He saw me and I did a TV show he had called Sammy and Company. And my whole routine was about growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood where I played basketball, like I say, on a black basketball team. I was the only white kid, played football on a black football team. And so I was doing routines about that. And Sammy loved those routines, and he took me on the road with him for 3 years,
Wow.
1977 and 1980. And then I'm touring with Smokey Robinson. I'm touring with Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Mac Davis, Tony Orlando and Don, as I told you, all these acts, because they all wanted a comedian who could work clean. And so, and I was doing that. And then when I'm touring with Smokey Robinson one time, we were appearing in Tahoe in 1982, in Lake Tahoe at Caesars. And 2 doors away, Frank Sinatra's at Harris Hotel, appearing there. And I was always a fan. When I was a little boy shining shoes in all the bars, Frank Sinatra was on the jukebox. I'm on my hands and knees shining shoes, and Frank Sinatra was on the jukebox, which incidentally is what you showed the book, still standing. Basically, the story is a little boy shining shoes in a bar on the south side of Chicago, hearing Sinatra on the jukebox. And one day that little boy carries Frank Sinatra's coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. So it takes you on that journey, and then all the things that happen in between there. So now I'm working with Smokey, and again, how fate would have it. I'm there 7 days with Smokey. I could choose any night to go over and see Frank Sinatra because I was a fan. And I had worked Harris Hotel. So I called over there, and the maitre d', one night I decided I'd go on a Wednesday night. The maitre d' said, Tommy, after my show, I'm gonna run over. He said, I'll have a place saved for you. I said, thank you. Okay, I finished my show at Caesars in Lake Tahoe, and I run off stage. And if you know Lake Tahoe, there's only one casino between you and Harris. And I'm rushing over there. I'm rushing through the casino. I'm going into the showroom, and I didn't want to miss Frank's opening because Frank Sinatra created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act. When he walked out and that room went just crazy, his fans, they would stand and cheer and everything. And he hadn't sung a note yet, So I didn't want to miss that opening. So I'm running into the showroom, and the vice president of Harris Hotel was standing out in front with a heavyset guy with a cigar. He said, he saw me and he said, Tommy, come here. And I reluctantly went over because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. And he said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin. Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer and a very powerful guy in our business. He said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. And I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he heard that a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. And he looked at me, he said, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? And I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way, if you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? And he started laughing. And he said, I like this kid. Now, a week later, they called me and said, would you like to work Atlantic City at the Golden Nugget with Frank Sinatra for 1 week? I thought, yeah, sure. I'll try to get my picture taken with him. I'll hang it in every bar back in Chicago, and that'll be it, And the second night I worked with him, he and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner in Atlantic City. And I can remember like it was yesterday, Bruce. He set his knife and his fork down, and he looked at me. He said, I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me check my calendar. I said, yeah. And it turned into 45, 50 cities a year, 14 years of the most exciting tour that you could ever be on, with the most exciting entertainer you could ever be around, and a rarefied air. And I ended up, I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral. But it was the most, it's hard to describe what it's like opening for a guy in 20,000 seat arenas, 20,000 people out there. And then in Hawaii, there was 40,000 people outdoors. But what that's like for a comedian, I'll give you a quick take. I'll say, Bruce, the first big arena I worked with him. Now I had worked with Sammy and Smokey. They draw 1,500, 2,000, but 20,000 people. I'll give you the scenario. Here it is, Bruce. We're at the Nassau Coliseum in New York. Let's just say that. I said, Bruce, it's 5 minutes now before you're going on. I said, Bruce, there's 20,000 people out there in the round, not in front of you, proscenium. They're all behind you, all around you. Bruce, I want you to go. Now the orchestra's in the orchestra pit. You don't have them at all. But say, Bruce, I want you to go out there, and for the next 45 minutes, I want you to hold their attention. There's 20,000 people. Oh, one more thing, Bruce. I want you to hold their attention, but I want you to make them laugh for the next 45 minutes. Oh, one more thing, Bruce. I want you to hold their attention and make them laugh, but I want you to make them laugh when you want them to laugh. I want you to pull the strings on the emotions of 20,000 people. No props, no tricks, no charts, no special arrangement, no special lighting, no orchestra, nothing. Just you and 20,000 people. And one more thing, Bruce, not one of them came to see you.
Wow. Wow.
That's your assignment. You got to go out there. You got to go out there. And they all came to see the other guy. But I teach young comedians this all the time. I realized that when you walk out on that stage in front of 20,000 people who thought Frank was coming out, don't go into your A material from Jump Street because it's going to bomb. You got to first get those people attention to you on that stage. Now, if there's 20,000 people in the arena, 2,000 or 3,000 are still trying to find their seats, swarming the theater. You got to get their attention right now. Walk out, and if you can, do a joke on yourself first. But you got to get them to come to you. So I would walk out and I'd say, I'd say, how many out there? I want you to applaud. And I'd walk around and say, I want you to applaud. How many of you out there thought Frank Sinatra was coming out? Applaud. And they would applaud. I said, okay. I said, how many of you out there, I'd say applaud. I'd say, I know just how you feel. I'm a little bit disappointed myself, Now that joke was on me. Then I'd say, how many of you out there are in this arena for your very first time? Applaud. Mind you, I didn't say raise your hand. I said, how many of you out there are in this arena for your very first time? Applaud. They would applaud. I'd say, how many of you out there are seeing Frank Sinatra live your very first time? Applaud. They'd applaud. I'd say, how many of you out there aren't wearing any underwear? Applaud. They'd applaud. Here's my point. I talk, you react. I talk, you react. I'm doing this all the way around the arena, bringing their focus to me, I talk, if I say raise your hand, that's not the same. Applaud. I'm getting them to react to me. Now, once I got them to react to me, then I would do a couple of jokes about that local area that I had read about and wrote about. So I brought them into the jokes about their area. And then I would go into my A material once I got them focused in on me,
Wow. Whew. Fantastic. So now I know why I didn't see much of you at the Improv during the 80s, because you were busy.
Oh, yeah. I'm on the road all the time. And I did, when I come off the road, I would still be working on new material. So I'd go to the Improv. I'd go to the Improv, then I'd go to the Comedy Store, and then run over to the Laugh Factory. I would, go to each place trying out new material, would take my tape recorder with me. As you know, in those days, every comedian carried a tape recorder, and then you would listen to it on the way home in your car or when you got home and try to figure out what's working. What I did, I did so many Tonight shows, 15 or 20 Tonight shows, when they knew now that I knew what they wanted. So I had carte blanche. I could call the Tonight Show and say, I would like to do the show March 18th, say 3 or 4 weeks from now, whatever the date was, and they say, okay, Tommy, I didn't have to audition. They knew I knew they wanted a strong stand-up. And then when you go sit to Johnny, have some funny stories there. So sometimes I didn't have the material, and I'd call them and I'd say, I want to do it March 18th. I'm throwing a date out there. And that's 3 weeks away. They say, okay, Tommy, you're on. Now, necessity is the mother of invention. I put the pressure on myself. Now I got to come up with that material. So now I'm manic. I'm writing jokes all the time, and I would get that piece of material ready in 3 weeks' time.
What was it like going on the road with Sammy? He's such a different kind of guy, a character, really a lover of life. What was that like?
Sammy Davis Jr. It was probably the most incredible entertainer that you could ever be around. Frank Sinatra said Sammy was a parade. There wasn't anything Sammy couldn't do on a stage. When I finished my show with Sammy, I always sat in the wings and watched him. The same way with Frank. And then when I worked with Dean Martin, the same way, I always wanted to watch those guys work. But Sammy could sing as good as anybody out there. He could dance better than anybody out there. He could do comedy as good as any comedian that I've ever seen. He could do impressions better than any impression out there. He could play the trumpet. He could play the piano. He could play the drums. There was nothing he couldn't do. He was born to be on a stage. But let me tell you a great story about him. We're pulling into Vegas. I had never worked Las Vegas. I was touring with Sammy. We were at the Mill Run Theater in Chicago. He came to my dressing room. He said, "Have you ever worked Las Vegas?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, you open there in January with me." I said, "Whoa, now, you're coming down that strip in a limousine and your name is on the marquee with Sammy Davis Jr." But what he made sure of, a lot of the big stars didn't put the opening act's name on the marquee. It was a star. They put their name, one name, like Tom Jones and Diana Ross put their name up there so big sometimes there wasn't room for you to park your car in the parking lot. So for a star like Sammy, he insisted that my name go up there half the size of his. He said, "Tommy, if I give you marquee, then whoever you work with from here after, we set a precedent." So he made sure that they put my name in that marquee big. Now we go inside, it's opening day. At rehearsal, the entertainment director, a guy named Nat Brandywine, said, "Tommy, you'll do 20 minutes. Sammy does an hour and 10. We do 90-minute shows here." He said, "You do 20, Sammy does an hour and 10. Sammy said, "No, Nat, this is Tommy's first time here. He's got a score." Now, everybody knew the toughest room for a comedian in Las Vegas is Caesar's Palace. For the reason was it has a real high ceiling. We like a low ceiling because laughter is sound. It hits the ceiling and comes at you. I loved the Sands Hotel when I worked there. I loved the Desert Inn. I loved the Riviera, the Golden Nugget. They had low ceilings. The laughter filled the room quicker. Now, and you set your timing off of their laughter, But Sammy, and also in those days, they serve food. Now, people are eating dinner at that first show. Waiters and waitresses are interrupting everything, going back and forth. You die like a dog on that stage, And Sammy knew that. He said, "Nat, I'll come out. I'll do 3 or 4 songs, and then I'll bring Tommy out, and Tommy can do his bit, and then I'll come back out and finish up whatever time we have left." He said, "Tommy, go as long as you want till you know you got him. You do 25, 30. I don't care. I'll make up the time afterward." Nat said, "Hey, Sammy, it's your show." Now waiters and waitresses are feeding everybody, and the lights go down, and the orchestra starts up, and Sammy walks out. Well, those people know, the waiters and waitresses, they got to get that food out of there when the headliner comes out. So they're hauling food away from people that haven't even finished eating yet. Sammy did 3 or 4 songs every night. Now the room is quiet. He's got them, cheering. He then says to them, this is how he introduced me every night. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you've been my audience for years. You've been good to me through the good times and the bad times. You stuck with me." So I started thinking of my audience sometimes like a family. And what do you do when family is good to you? You want to do something good for them, like maybe bring them a gift. "I got a gift for you. I saw this young guy. I know you're going to like him like I liked him. It's his first time in Las Vegas. Will you welcome, please, Tom Dreesen?" Well, he would walk out. I would walk out. He had that audience up here, and I'd always say, all my life, I dreamed that I would work Las Vegas. And I also dreamed that it would be Caesar's Palace, but I never dreamed that Sammy Davis Jr. would be my opening act. And Sammy would laugh and they would laugh. And that's how that's Sammy Davis, how giving he was,
Yeah, I read his book years ago. No one had a tougher time in their life and in show business than Sammy. I don't need you to talk about that, but what was he like off stage when you were together having dinner or whatever?
Oh, he was a pal. He knew I was a street kid. I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. And Sammy was a street kid also in so many different ways. And so we had so much fun. After our shows in Vegas, we'd go up and down the strip seeing the Louis Prima and Keely Smith and the Treniers. And we'd go from lounge to lounge. And at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they say, "Look who's out there, Tommy Dreesen. Tommy, come up and do a couple of minutes." You'd get up on the stage with the Treniers or Louis Prima. And same way with Sammy. They'd say, "Hey, Sammy, how about a song or two?" And we did that till the sun came up. Sammy Davis Jr., for those who understand what I'm about to say, he was the Jackie Robinson of show business. And nothing bothers me more than when I see young Black comedians talking about Sammy and making funny faces, and they don't know what he did for show business for Black people. He was the Jackie Robinson of show business. He paid dues, you know, and that's why Frank and him were real close, because Frank helped him in some of those situations. Sammy was just a wonderful, wonderful guy. I went to his funeral with Frank and Dean, and it was a sad time for me. It was a real sad time because he was a dear, dear, sweet friend.
You know what, Tom? No one's lived a sweeter life than you. This is, this what I'm learning is just unbelievable. And I could spend all day with you, and I appreciate the time you're spending with me. Just want to ask you one more thing, and then we'll look at your book again, and we'll talk more about your book. Again, when we talk about the comedians in the 80s, I remember watching Evening at the Improv and being able to say, boy, that Jim Carrey is really something. He's going to be big. And this one and that one. I remember pointing out about 10 people, and half of them got to be pretty big comedians and actors. Who did you think, when you first saw them for the first time, had a really good chance of making it in the business?
Well, there was no doubt that I did like a couple Tonight shows, and they put me as a headliner at the Laugh Stop in Newport Beach. And my opening acts were Roger and Roger, a comedy team.
Oh, I love them. They're my buds.
Yeah, they both passed away now. Willie Tyler and Lester. Willie's still alive. I think the dummy died.
Nah, Willie did my show. That's great. Yeah.
Facetious, but Willie's a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
It was a ventriloquist. And a new kid named Robin Williams.
Yeah.
When I first heard, when the owner of the club said, and Robin Williams, I said, oh, what does she do? He said, no, God. Robin, and so anyhow, I saw him, and the moment I saw him, he blew me out of the room. You knew this guy was unlike any other comic that I'd ever seen. First of all, Robin couldn't do 6 minutes on the Tonight Show. He couldn't go out and do 6 minutes stand up. He could do an hour and a half. You know what I mean? Because Robin didn't have that structure to do a tight 5 or tight 6. But because his brain, wherever his brain went, he went, and he was way in front of his brain most of the time. He was a gentle, sweet, loving human being, and just brilliant. I seen him do things on stage that other comedians, you go, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. Let me digress for a minute. I once asked Frank Sinatra's drummer, Irv Cotler, who's the greatest drummer of all time? He said, oh, Tommy, Buddy Rich. He said, there are drummers here and there's Buddy Rich here. There's no comparison. He said 6 or 7 drummers would be in the back of the room when Buddy was on stage, and he'd be doing, and the drummers would look at each other and say, you can't do that. Did you see what he just did? You can't do that. And that's the way it was with Robin. Robin would be on that stage, and he would be going into an area he wasn't afraid to risk. He would go into an area and you'd think there's nothing there, and he'd find something there. He would. That's one. When I saw Jerry Seinfeld in New York when he was a new kid. Not only was he not a likable, a very nice guy, but you liked him when he went on stage, and I think a lot of that is part of our that you have to like the comedian before you laugh at them, and he was a real student of comedy, Of course, when I first saw Chris Rock, I fell off the chair. Dave Chappelle, when I first saw him, I went, oh boy, this is a genius kind of comedian. That there's talent is what you possess. Genius is what possesses you, and that's the tragedy of genius, because genius can take you to some dark places.
Yeah. I remember I just had Barry Diamond on the other day, and Barry worked a lot of Las Vegas, and when he first came out from New York, it was right around the time when Robin made his, because he came down from San Francisco, and really nobody knew Robin because he was up in San Francisco. But one of the first people he saw when he got out to LA was Robin, and he said, Jesus, if that's the kind of talent they have out here, oh my God, he was like blown away. He says, I have to compete with that.
Unfortunately, I had a lot of years in the business before that. So I knew there were different. If I was brand new, I'd have felt the same way as Barry. But fortunately, I knew there are monologists, there's slapstick, there's all different types of comedy. And comedy isn't what we are, it's what you are. You know, everybody has their own thing that makes them laugh. You know, Robin, I'll never forget one night, all the comedians got in the back of the room because Robin was doing a piece of material that was bombing. And all of a sudden the comedians, because no one ever seen Robin bomb, you know, and he's out there on a limb with some piece of material that's going nowhere. But typical Robin, all of a sudden, he began to show the audience what goes on inside of a comedian's brain when he's bombing. And he said, we need more jokes. He goes, I've got to get down to the basement. Where's that joke file? Right here. And he's throwing jokes out. He's going, take my wife, please. No, that's been done before. Throwing jokes out of the file. And we, all of a sudden, he had the audience and all of us laughing. He took that disaster and turned it into a victory, you know.
Wow.
That's the way his mind was. He was, and again, you'll never meet a sweeter soul in your whole life. And he was tortured, you know, as geniuses sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. So your book, just spectacular. I look so forward to reading your book. You sent it out to me, and I appreciate that. I'm going to be reading it. Tell me about your book.
Well, you know, in all the years that I toured, again, 51 years I've been in show business. When I first started touring with Tim Reed and everything, if something poignant or something funny happened, I would go back to my room and journal it. I just write down something that happened that day, you know, and then as years go by and you're meeting all these new young stars, I would journal all those things that I'm meeting. And then, you know, again, touring with Sammy and Frank and Dean and doing the Dean Martin roast and meeting all these people.
Oh, quiet. Go lay down. Quiet. I'm on Hollywood. Here. I'm Dreesen.
By the way, don't take that out. That's perfect. That's perfect. And the dog said, Tom Dreesen. And when
he looked at me, who's Tom? That's not nice. That's not nice.
He yawned and he fell asleep, just like most of the audience. What can you expect? What made me write this book was, ever since I started out in show business, and this is my 51st year in show business, when I was touring with Tim Reed or whatever, if something funny or poignant happened, I would go back to the room and journal, you know. And then all the years, you know, when I went off on my own, and then I'm appearing at the Comedy Store with all these young stars, I would journal those stories. And then the Comedy Store strike, which you're well aware of, that was a very dramatic and traumatic time in my life and in a lot of comedians' lives. I journaled all that. And then from there, going on to touring with Sammy Davis, touring with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, you know, all the other artists I toured. I would journal if something funny or poignant happened. And then I've got all these stories accumulated. Excuse me. And a couple of years ago, I was thinking, you know, I might want to write a small book, not for sale, but for my grandchildren. One day, their children, who I will not know, will say, what was your grandpa like? And they could say, here's a book about my grandpa's life, you know? And so that's what I did. And now, meanwhile, I got it all organized and I get a call from two guys, John Russo and Darren Grubb. And they said, Mr. Dreesen, they got me in a conference call. They said, we have a deal with a publisher. We want to write a book about your life. We think your life is very interesting and we'd like to write a book. And I said, fellas, I've already written the book, you know, but you could, if you want to help me with the narration and help me, I would send them chapter after chapter after chapter. And then they would say, this is good. That's good. Let's take this line and put it in chapter 17. They helped me thread the story better than I could have done it, for sure. And now the book on Amazon has like 175 5-star reviews.
Wow.
You can go to Amazon.com to get the book, or Barnes and Noble. But if you go to Amazon.com, you'll read the reviews. I'm overwhelmed, Bruce, by the way. By the way, you always had a way with women. You always had a way. Is that a little girl? No, it's a little boy, huh? Well.
He loves you, Tom. He just loves you. He wants in on this action. Who wouldn't? This is Tom Dreesen, Brady.
By the way,
Tom Dreesen.
I'm making to make my own children laugh. I love making people laugh, but I could make my own children laugh. That made me happier than anything. We had a dog, a German Shepherd named Baby, And I love the dog, and so do the kids. And I still got a picture on my desk, and the dog is gone for like 30 years, but I miss that dog every day. But I would be watching TV, and Baby, the German Shepherd, would come and she'd put her nose in my ear. You know how dogs do it. And I'd go, really? Nah, you're kidding me. You do? Now my children would say, Dad, I'd say, shh, Baby's talking to me. She's not talking to you. I said, yes, she's. I said, what is she saying? And this is a true story. I said, you do? I said, she likes a group out there called 3 Dog Night. You remember that group, 3 Dog Night?
Sure, sure.
She said her favorite group is 3 Dog Night. Oh, Daddy, she didn't say that. Now that was our joke, right? A couple of years go by, and I'm working with 3 Dog Night on a corporate gig. And I said to the guys afterward, I didn't tell them it was for a dog. I said, hey, I got a housekeeper named Baby. I couldn't say, I got a dog. I said, who really loves you, would you sign a picture? So they put to Baby, we love you too, 3 Dog Night, right? So I got the picture framed. When I came off the road, I put it right by her dog dish. So my kids, when they got up in the morning and they saw that, they couldn't stop laughing. And to this day, they have that picture, But
Wow.
Nothing pleases a comedian more, I would say, than when you can make your own children laugh. And I tried to make them laugh ever since they were babies,
Tom, they will have this video to learn a lot about you with your own voice, your own history. I look forward to maybe hearing from you after your family. You've probably done 101 of these before, but maybe not the same way where you just had a chance to tell your story. And I super appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. This is more than I even thought about that we could have together. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, I mean, my time is your time. Whatever you want, I'm happy to do it. I really am. And through the years, you help comedians get work, and that means a lot to me. Laughter, is needed more today than ever before. I don't know how much more time you have, but I'd like to.
I have all the time that you need.
I give, as I told you, I give motivation talks to comedians. But one of the things I tell them, you are in the greatest profession ever on the planet. And I'm not saying that because I'm a stand-up comedian or you're a stand-up comedian. I'm not patronizing you. Let me explain to you that laughter is health. If you didn't know that, laughter is healing. I said, and we always theorize that. And because we theorize that, because we'd say, well, if the brain can't think of 2 thoughts at the same time. So if a comedian, if you're laughing at a comedian, you're not thinking of your problems. So it's a psychological deterrent. But many years ago, a man named Norman Cousins, the editor of Saturday Review, was dying of a terminal illness. The doctors told him that he had a heart condition, that stress had caused this heart condition. And he was laying in a hospital and he didn't have long to live. And he thought laying in a hospital, if stress, negative input made me ill, then positive input would make me well. So he checked out of the hospital and he'd only watch I Love Lucy reruns, Candid Camera, Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers. He'd only listen to comedy albums. He wouldn't watch the evening news. He would just, anything that was funny. He'd read things that were funny or watch things that were funny. He lived 27 years after the doctors told him he died. Now, because of him, UCLA did research on what happens to the human body when it laughs. When you have a hearty laugh, you've laughed so hard, like tears are coming down your eyes. Endorphins are released from your brain into the bloodstream. That's why the sense of well-being comes after a big laugh. You go, your body's gone through an actual chemical change. So laughter is not only psychologically a deterrent, it's physiologically therapeutic. Therefore, comedians are physicians of the soul. So
and indirectly, that's why I'm doing this show, because I'm bringing back the memories, the thoughts, the actions, the activities. Everybody's getting a chance to relive this again, and it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this show.
Well, you're doing a great service again, and that's what I tell comedians. You know how important you are, to society. Do not tarnish that. Think about what I'm telling you. I tell the comedians all the time. I say, think about what I'm telling you. That the insurance companies of America did a survey many years ago around the world of the 10 fears of man. Death was 4th. Pain was 2nd. Getting up in front of an audience was the #1 fear of mankind. If you can get up in front of an audience and talk about being an agent, talk about being a house painter, a truck driver, a bricklayer, a lawyer, whatever, If you can get in front of an audience and do that for an hour, you're in less than 1% of the population of the world. If you can get up and make people laugh for 1 hour, you're in less than 1/1,000,000th of 1% of the population of the world. Do you know how important you are to our society? I say to stand-up comedians, and you are. You know how important you. Don't tarnish that gift that you have. It's a God-given gift. You worked hard to develop it and took it to its maximum. Take it to as far as it can go. But you were given a gift that you can make people laugh. In spite of your fears, in spite of your doubts, you overcame that, or you learned to work scared, but you got out there and you made people laugh. You can tarnish that in a couple ways. One is by destroying that brain that makes you funny with alcohol or drugs. The other is of not appreciating this wonderful gift you have, and never knock another comedian. I tell you, I've never met a comedian I didn't like on stage. I could always find something that they did on stage that I like. That might off stage maybe might be somebody you wouldn't hang around with for whatever reason, but they're all special. All comedians are real special. So don't knock another comedian. Did you ever meet a doctor that you'd say, gee, I'm going to go see Dr. Sedlow? And you'd ever hear another doctor say, Sedlow, I wouldn't trust my snake with that. They don't talk bad about their profession, nor should we. We're as professional as they are. You know, if you don't have anything good to say about another comedian, don't say anything at all. You know, anyhow.
No one has been more of a gift to the world of comedy, the golden age of comedy, than you. No one has done more with what you've amassed than you. You've done such, we haven't even gone into all the great work and all the giving that you've done. They'll read that in your book, but I want to thank you so much again, Tom. This has been a real blessing to me, and I just really appreciate you. I appreciate the memories I had of you, seeing you one evening at the Improv, hanging out at the Improv, and now to hear all you've done and all the good things that you say about comedy. It's just a blessing to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bruce. And we'll talk again in the future.
I would love that. God bless. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Tom Dreesen, a blessing. Bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.